Hello everyone, this is Sir Regan here. We're going to be teaching about the science and math and all that fun goody stuff about battle games today. Please forgive me, I do have to read off of notes because my mind wanders into places that it's all over the place and it's crazy. Um, okay, so everyone knows what battle games are. Battle games are a essential thing that a lot of us do during the week. It's what we look forward to. Um, I remember my first couple of battle games I played. Capturing treasure from a group of monsters, and everything's great. And within minutes, it can all change. It can go bad. People can get upset. People will go, "Hey, that's not fair," or "That doesn't make sense," or the biggest one, people get confused. And there's a science behind it for people to help them understand and make things, simple for people who are playing battle games. And that's kind of what we're going to do today. Is we're going to go through some tips, tricks, some applications, some rules, some general rules that some people do, some people don't. That I find that work for me. Um, so we'll go ahead and start. We have some basic we have some basic key rules to design. Um, the very first thing that I focus on when creating a battle game is as I outline. I'll have the name of the game. I'll have a number of players. I'll put whether I have monsters in it or not. The finer details later. Um, and I'll create a list chart. I'll leave some things blank and fill in as I go. Um, that's just the basics of creating it. Your description, map, items needed, uh, name, number of players, if it's what type it is. So when you focus on creating the battle games, you should create that step first. Your role play and all that stuff you can fill in afterwards. But once you have a good solid foundation, it's that foundation that you can build upon that makes it easier. One of the very first things you should think of is whether or not it is a ditch style, militia style, class style, or quest style type of battle game. It makes a lot of difference. Your quests and your class games are going to have, of course, your class abilities. Your militia is going to have your armor and your projectiles, but no class abilities. And then, of course, your ditch is just going to be your standard melee weapons without projectiles, without armor, without class abilities. And that'll, of course, make a difference in the battle game you're creating, because if you usually create like a ditch-style battle game, but then you throw in monsters with abilities, it usually throws things off. People will get confused about that. So once you figure that out, what you're going to go ahead and do is, of course, you're going to have to figure out your descriptions. Most of the time, objective games are where you're going to want to go. If you're creating objective games, you give everybody, and I mean everybody, a chance to shine. What ends up happening a lot of the time is for mutual annihilation battle games, it's always whoever has the better skill, whether it be for class abilities or fighting ability. And what ends up happening is one side will usually either overwhelm the other, or especially your new players who aren't really knowing what they're doing are just going to get trampled. They have no chance to shine because they'll always keep dying. And of course, we all learn, and that's how we grow, but it doesn't make a great battle game because the new players are going to come out going, "I didn't get to do anything. All I really did was go out there for 2 minutes, get killed, come back, go back out, and repeat the process over and over." And that can happen for any type of battle game that you have. And it's just it's just so bad for people. What it really ends up happening otherwise is, even if you do a pool of lives and stuff, high respawns and stuff, it just really puts a damper on people with it. With objective style battle games, you have several points of contention, you have teamwork, and it gives people a chance, especially with multiple objective style battle games. Uh, Examples, very heavy objects, plural, where you'll have one over here or one over here. You have two places that you can go. Your skilled players are not going to be able to hit both at the same time. If you have like a really high stick level player that's focusing on the other objective, then you still have that objective to go. If you have, let's say, 4 or 5 capture points, it's the same situation where you have multiple, capture points that you can reach. And you're not going to have to run into the person if you don't want to. And usually for V8, objective style battle games are usually what make it better and what make it work more. So let's go ahead and go over some goals for creation here. Okay. What's really hard to do is divide your teams. Okay. Give every person the potential to contribute. It's possible to design a game to where things unbalance everything. If you throw all your good stick people on one side, you're gonna have issues. What's gonna happen is they're basically gonna outstick everyone, especially in ditch and militia games. They're just gonna run up, they're just gonna be better, and that's it. And the game's over within minutes. Other things are, if your teams don't have certain abilities, let's say like resurrections and stuff, what happens, especially in Mutual Annihilation, is you run into what I affectionately call infinite resurrection, where what's going to happen is, whether you have a bard or not, you're going to charge your abilities, you're going to resurrect your teammate, and you're going to repeat this process. Your goal for Mutual Annihilation is to kill the enemy team. It's kind of hard to do when they keep just popping back up without losing their lives. Especially if there's a bard on the team as well. Whenever you do objective-style battle games, yes, resurrecting helps, because you don't have to walk all the way back to respawn, but it also doesn't make the game unwinnable, because you don't have life counts to worry about, you have objectives to worry about to capture. A good thing to avoid is giving kind of special things. You don't want to give overpowered people extra things. You want people to be able to be hit. You want to avoid things like, let's say an example, you don't want archers. You don't want them to be unkillable, like putting them in different sections, because that's just terrible. And what ends up happening is you have players who can't be killed, which there'll be another section on monsters that can't be killed in a minute. And what ends up happening is you highly overpower the archers, because their one weakness for close range combat is now out the window. So what ends up happening, of course, is you can't kill them and they're just going to shoot you. And it's a continual process, and nobody likes that. So we'll go ahead on the next thing is, you want everyone to be of kind of equal value. Most games, when you make a target, are rough. Especially when you make a new person a target. Because what happens is when, let's say, there's a game called VIP, where you have two sides, and everyone has infinite lives except for the VIP, who has one life. And what ends up happening is, especially for lesser skilled players, they become easy kills, and you remove them from the game so easily. That way, they don't really have a chance to go ahead and play. And there's nothing worse than sitting down and watching your friends play while you sit there and do nothing. And what happens with games like VIP is once you kill the VIP has to sit down. And of course, there's one life after the VIP dies for the rest of the players. So what ends up happening, of course, is at that point, you're sitting down, you're watching your friends play until the game resets. That's so boring. Imagine driving out to a park day to have to sit down half the time to watch your friends. For some people, they might enjoy that, but if you're really wanting to go out there and fight, it just ruins the experience, and you definitely want to avoid that. Life pool is a major one that I really don't like to see. What ends up happening is you have your newer players, those are going to be the targets of the other team, because they're easier to kill. And they're going to deplete your life pool quicker and quicker and quicker. And what ends up happening is you treat your newer players as a weakness, as a detriment. And that is a very terrible morale booster. And those kind of things make the new people upset. Because they're like, oh man, I keep dying so quick because every time I go out, I have 3 or 4 people that just trample me and that's it. And there's no fun in it. So your goal for things are when you offer no particular reward for killing a player, unless it is what they're doing. The example is if they're trying to grab the very heavy object, it makes them worth killing. Otherwise, it might make them worth killing, but not as much as it would if it was like a life pool gain. So what it does is it gives them, a worth. Not because they're not great at fighting. So what it is anyone who can capture something or carry something become equally viable. And that's great. It makes the new players more involved, and they know that that's the objective. And it avoids things when you do life games, like life pools. It makes them, less of a major target for objective games with that. So, another thing is to minimize the impact of skill. You want the balance, okay? Like I've mentioned earlier, no matter how skilled someone is at a stick or casting, they can only be at one place at a time. And just like with the very heavy object, if they're so focused on the one object, you have another object to grab without worrying about, the super buff, fighter that's just killing everyone. And it makes it even better if you have multiple objectives, because they would have to bounce around. That gives you time to take care of the other sections, like if you need to do multiple, like King of the Hill capture points. And nobody wants to run around like a chicken with their head cut off. I mean, well, I speak for myself anyways, when they have to run around everywhere to multiple points. So it gives everyone the opportunity to go ahead and contribute, which is the next part. Even if you're not good at fighting or casting magic, when you give people an equal opportunity to capture objectives, like capture the flag, where they don't even need a weapon, they can use their speed in order to pick up, the flag. Or if they need to capture areas, they can, capture it by standing still, because it takes no skill at, standing still. If you're good at looking around and noticing things, you can pick out different sections that may need people. Kind of a tactician role with it. If you're good at the other skills, of course you can help out, and it gives them a chance to contribute as well, whether that crowd control or killing or, buffing your team. And you can heal and injure people, and it makes it intense, but gives everyone an opportunity to contribute. And that's kind of what we want in the game. We want everyone to try and have fun, so contributing is one of the best things. Um, Everyone should be able to play as much as possible. As I mentioned earlier, when you do things like a life pool or like the VIP game, you'll always have like that one or group of people who will end up dying quicker. They have to sit down in a chair and watch the rest of the game. And it's boring. They want to go out and they want to play. They want to go and have fun. And when you do things like objective games, like a time limit, and when you don't have a life count, people usually have time to have fun. And a lot of the times what can end up happening is when you do things like mutual annihilation or, other things, people will go out and they'll get killed quickly, they'll have to count a time, and it gets boring. A really good thing that you want to do is you want to make dying important and matter, but you also want them to be able to go out and still have the fun. Usually your life counts are going to determine those things. Let's say to capture a point it takes you 10 seconds, so you'll want your respawn to be higher than that, so you give people a chance to capture, and give the other team a chance to go take it back. So the next thing you want to do is you want to avoid okay, how do I describe this one? Because this one's a bit different. You want to minimize your impacts of defeat. Usually what ends up happening is your newer people are going to be the ones who are going to die the most. They're going to be under the effects the most. And what you want to do is you want to make it a kind of a fleeting dream. And what you're going to want to do is you want to reduce the amount of time for certain, for players that, want to play. And let's see here. Whenever you have just a single penalty for dying, it makes it a lot better than the multiple penalties that you would face. So lesser counts usually help. Let's see. So there's obviously always going to be a penalty here. But you don't want to target, you don't want the newer players to face things too much like that. So, an example of that would be good is you have multiple capture points, and dying would just be you unable to capture the point, you have to go back and respawn. So what you want to do is when you have multiple objectives, your players aren't going to try and just rush out just to die sometimes. Though granted they do because, new players. But when they have multiple objectives, they can avoid dying so much because they have other spots that they can go to. And of course, advantages and disadvantages for that, but it's also their choice to go ahead and have fun with it. Game balance is one of the tough ones to maintain here. There's a lot of things that give another team a higher benefit than the other. So what happens is mutual annihilation, we'll say it again. What happens is when a player loses all their lives, that player is done. So now your team now has less people to contend with the other team. And what happens is you start to notice that you start getting a disadvantage as you're losing members on your team because they're shattered out. And sometimes that happens early. But in any case, it makes it, it makes it terrible because not only do you have the players sitting down, but now your team is unbalanced because you have your team losing players as they go. And these are some of the things that you want to avoid. So when you have unlimited life games with objectives, what ends up happening is you have your players will still have your standard teams. Excuse me. So you don't have teams that are sitting down after players who are sitting down, giving an unfair advantage because this team has more players than the other. A really big thing that you'll want to try to do is you want people to fight. You don't want them to sit around and, kind of sit there the whole time. Uh, what you do is you place your sections to get players to fight. When you have things like, let's say, a very heavy object game, you're of course going to have to enforce the fighting at that point, because what's going to happen is they don't want to lose, so they're going to take their team, they're going to rush over to where the other team is carrying the object to stop them. That helps force the fighting, and what happens is it rewards engagement, and it rewards the play, because people are having fun. Of course, they're also helping the objectives, and of course the objectives help the players go ahead and go ahead and have their good time with it. Now, once you go ahead and you create your battle games based off of different criterias, and choosing, and of course trying to make playability, trying to even up teams, a really good thing to do is a backstory. So, for when you create a backstory, it can be anything as simple as a couple of sentences, or it can be as complex as a paragraph. You obviously don't want to make it too high over, because very heavy object game where you capture these totes doesn't sound that entertaining. But if you go, okay, goblins are transporting food supplies to their dragon broodmother, that sounds a lot more interesting than, okay, there's boxes, go take the boxes over there. So then you can create your battle games based off of that, where you go, oh, well, okay, let's make these all the players goblins, they're goblin tribes. And it makes it more interesting. And it keeps players interested because they're like, hey, that sounds a lot better. And it makes it sound a lot better, like I said, than going, there's a box, move it, or there's a piece of cloth on the ground, move it over this way. And it makes it a lot better, a lot more people find it more entertaining, and and they'll listen. Because when you make it more interesting, just like a story, they'll listen to you. So, we'll go over a couple of bad things I've seen that you want to avoid when creating your battle games as well here. When you deliberately nerf players, okay, it is unfair to those players, because now you made it fun for everyone except for that player, and it makes them feel like that they're being punished for having some kind of skill, whether it's fighting skill, magic skill, monster skill, whatever. And that's terrible. And what's even worse is if you nerf a player and they're angry enough, they're going to want to go ahead and do even harder. They're going to really wail on people, and it's going to be so unfair. And you want to avoid that because it makes the player feel bad. And you don't want to do that. You want to balance your battle game, and you want to make it more of an objective style battle game, of course. And it makes it more fun for everyone, like I said earlier, with a couple of examples, multiple capture points. If you go ahead and do that, you don't have to worry about nerfing a player, because the player's not going to be in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or more places at once. One that's really, really bad that I've done before, and I still beat myself up to this day, is things that you can't kill. When you make things super powerful that you can't kill it, people get so upset because they want to try and kill it. But when you give something 6 points of armor with a bunch of added effects that like instant destroy weapons and armor and players, which makes them feel unkillable, and of course people will get frustrated because they can't kill it, especially if it's the only objective you need to kill. Overpowered monsters are cool, but when you make it essentially, unkillable or unbeatable, it gets frustrating because then your questers can't finish their objective and they leave feeling, what was the point of even having this quest? Because they can't even kill the thing because it's just so overpowered with a bunch of effects that you splashed in. So those are the things that you want to try and avoid. One thing that I've really, really that I've seen a problem with in a lot of battle games that you want to avoid is trying to make things change or fix in the middle of a game. It is a lot better to finish the game, get your feedback, and do a new thing. What happens is when you have a team that's, is winning, and then you go ahead and try to fix it because the one team that's winning is doing too well, and let's say you give a buff to the losing team and everything else, what ends up happening is the players that were supposed to win now have to, if they lose, they're going to feel so terrible. Because now you have these players who are now losing just because the other players weren't doing so well, they decided to give them something. So what it now ends up happening is all you're doing is you're shifting your good mood here over to the bad mood here, when your goal is to create the good mood all around. So you really want to avoid that because it makes your happy people upset. And one of the biggest ones that I see is moving players around in the middle of the game, and it gets so confusing. When you have your really good player on this team and you go, oh, this team's losing, so let's move this player over here and take this player and go over here. Not only do you not have your teammate that you knew the whole time, so your newer players who don't know who it is are going to go, wasn't he on the enemy team? I'm confused. Your next point after that, of course, is you can really unbalance the game the other direction instead. And of course, your winning players are going to get upset because now they're losing because they were the smart ones that had a plan to go ahead and win. It's a lot better just to balance the battle game or do a different battle game. So, as far as your battle game once it's made, okay, there's a couple of things more to go ahead and think of here. I have a method called the KISS method, which is either keep it simple stupid or keep it a simple start. And what happens is when you try to add so much stuff to your battle game, you have to describe every little detail so the players get it. Players are going to ask questions. Players are going to, they're always going to ask, hey, I didn't hear that, what's this? Or in the middle of the game, they're going to go, what was the respawn count again? What do I need to capture? What is this thing? And they're always going to do that, okay? When you add too much stuff, it becomes a disaster. When teaching people to run battle games, emphasize the importance of 3. As in 3 minutes tops. If it takes you more than 3 minutes to fully describe your battle game, you might want to relook at your battle game. If you have more than 3 special rules for a game, people are gonna forget. Limit the number of special rules. No one wants to hear a long list of rules. They want to go and play the game. If you take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to go ahead and describe that this section, needs to be captured, but you have to say this paragraph for this section and another paragraph for this section. People are trying to remember their own spells and abilities, let alone an extra paragraph and a paragraph and other things. Oh, but don't forget the river in the middle. Then they have to remember stuff like that. You want to keep them simple. You really want to be able to explain it in 3 minutes or less, or even quicker if possible. Common example, where you would go, okay, so this is a militia bridge battle. Everyone should know what militia is. If not, you give a brief description of militia, which should be 1 or 2 sentences. Then you go, bridge battle. On the sides of the bridges are water. They're marked with blue cones or blue tape. The bridge is marked off with brown tape or brown cones or whatever color. Your goal is to capture the opponent's flag and return it to your base. You can block with the flag. You must have an empty hand to carry the flag. And it takes only a couple of sentences, maybe a minute or 2 to describe. And when you do that, people are going to remember. And that means fewer frustrations, and it means the quicker time that players can go out and play the game. A really good idea, of course, is whenever you are presenting battle games for, let's say, a park day or a kingdom event, post them ahead of time. That way players have time to plan, read and know the rules, and to go ahead and know if there's other special things to have or to bring. Now, everyone loves props, and everyone loves different things out there. Unless it's objective, players are probably going to try, players might ignore things. If you make a battle game where you have, let's say, an extra magic item in the corner that's a shield, let's say, Shield of the Chosen, players, when you do your battle game, players may ignore that shield. They may not want it. People want to play certain games because they want to have the fun. And you can toss unnecessary stuff and focus on central elements, and people will have fun. Let's say you have a maze. People are going to have fun in the maze, and if you have the central focus of having the fun in the maze, that's what the players are going to focus on. And then if there's other players that want to focus on, let's say, traps and other stuff that might be in the maze, then that's cool. But it doesn't have to be, the central thing. So, a good way to get started, or a good way to get, things rolling, is to take other ideas. You can use real-time strategy games, first-person shooters. Example might be Overwatch, okay? The games are already done. All you have to do is you follow many of the design rules layout, and you adapt. And you put it into the battle game. Example, of course, Overwatch. There's that game. You have teams, and there's a payload that you have to move the payload to the destination. You can make that into an Amtgard battle game. Follow the design rules and go, and you can copy paste that in there if you need to. And it's a race. You can do it the other way, to where you leave it in the middle and you have to bring it to the opponent's side, or move it to the other side. Obviously, you'll want to play test your battle games and stuff, but if you make each thing, with the roleplay scenario as well to it, and add the flavor, you go ahead and you have a really good battle game. So obviously, you can call it Overwatch, but if you call it, a payload battle, you have orcs that are fighting for, supremacy. And in order to win, you have to bring the orc favor to the enemy side in order to dominate them and essentially win. And that adds your flavor and stuff to that. So you'll want to create a flow with your battle games with it, okay? People dislike bad battle games, not just battle games in general. What happens is when you make a good battle game, people have fun. Uh, when you don't add a bunch of cluttered mess in it, it makes things easier to go ahead and try to explain. Start simple. Consider whether they can be even simpler. A lot of people don't want to go ahead and remember a million things, like I've said earlier. Make sure that the games are doing what they're supposed to be doing and making sure everyone has fun. Um, and it's your job to go ahead and make it happen. So we're going to go ahead and move from battle games over to more of the quest part. So what we have is we have our battle games, and of course you can make these into quests. All you have to do is just add a little more roleplay, backstory effort into it. For that, story is key. Write out an intro to get people involved. And you'll want to go ahead and once you get the people involved, it will get people hooked in. Do a good setting. You'll want to create your setting. If it's elves in a woods, you can describe the woods, the shining woods of wherever, you can add whatever name you want to. And that gets people a mental image of what they're going ahead and what they're going to be getting into. You can add, some kind of, forest creatures, forest terrain, or whatever you need to do for that. And of course, writing an outro for your stories as well. Whether they win or they lose, create a story for it, but make it to where they can try again for the questers. That way they can go, okay, we may have lost, but we can still try again or try something else and come up with a new scenario or gameplay for people to go ahead and try. You can also do that for multipart quests, which multipart quests are great. Because if you go ahead and you have your first setting, your quest, and if they win, you can do that battle game. But if they lose, you can do that battle game. And you can keep it all in the same day, that way the stories kind of correlate and go through. Of course, you have your different themes and reigns and stuff, and it's a good idea to talk with your park monarch or kingdom monarch, whatever scenario you're doing, and just go ahead and let them know, hey, I want to do this for the story, and you can incorporate that into it, and people can go ahead and have fun with it. There are 3 great things to look for quest design. You have your roleplay, you have your puzzle, and you have your fighting. For your roleplay, you need to give your NPCs and monsters motivation. And you also want to give your questers motivation. Why would the monsters want to participate? Why would the questers want to participate? Do the questers even want to go to the woods? to go fight some elves? Do the monsters even care that these random adventurers are in the woods? Good quests should allow players to choose fighting or, of course, talking their way out of scenarios. The perfect example is goblins and shinies. You don't have to fight goblins. Half the time the goblins go, ooh, shinies, I like shinies, and you give them a shiny. And give them the opportunities to make these decisions and choices. If let's say if a character's all about treasure, you can have a room set up to where the characters will have the choice between choosing to save people or to kill people, whether their greed will take them in or not. And giving them the choice to help, those scenarios. And what's even great is when you have other questers who have different moral values. They don't want people to die because they're like, oh, well, you're greedy, so we don't want you to do this. So then they might want to try and stop them. It's great to have them make decisions and choose whether it's a benefit for one or all, and let them fight. They can fight whoever gets treasure, or who gets the lead, or stays behind, and it makes it fun. Puzzles. Puzzles work often. Usually, whenever I do different quests and stuff, usually I place them in the middle. And what you do is of course they need a clue to solve puzzles, because if anyone's ever played D&D, you could do puzzles for 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and we still overthink it all day and have a hard time getting through it. So it helps to have clues in a few places, for people to kind of get an idea. It could be as simple as, you're all in a dungeon, find out how to get out. Or, you need to solve this picture puzzle, in order to get out. And then your clue would be have to do with the pictures. So, rock, paper, scissors. So, what you'll do is you'll outline it in a triangle for, paper here, rock here, so paper beats rock, and then from rock here, scissors here, and then that would, that could kind of be your puzzle, but you give them the clue, of something like, one beats this one beats this one. Of course, you want to make use of your monsters and all that. Most people consider the door monster manual to go ahead. Some people like to do custom monsters as well. When you choose your monsters, you got to be careful, of course, not to run into what I mentioned earlier, where you have an unkillable monster. If you throw a dragon into a group of like 5 new players, they're going to wonder how they're even going to survive, what they're even going to do. So you'll want to check out their different types, abilities, and of course go ahead and see what would work for the story, and of course what would work for the for your battle game balance as well. Excuse me. A good rule is if you're using multiple monsters, is to have low-level monsters in parts of the quest and higher-level monsters at the later parts. Of course, you can have the main monster, your big guy, reoccur through different places as well. A big example that I like, of course, is using goblins. You can have an orc leader that's commanding the goblins, and then, of course, once they beat the goblins, eventually they'll run into the orc. And then you can find out later that the orc is actually being controlled by a dragon, and then the dragon ends up being the last person. But there's all sorts of layouts and stuff that you can do with that, and what you do is you follow those fundamental rules and you create your battle games. And the biggest thing you want to do is when you create your battle games, play test You want to find out what works, what doesn't work, what people are enjoying, what people are not enjoying. You may create this big thing just to throw it in the trash because it's just not going to work. And then you can start over. And that's where the science comes in for this. It's experimentation. You're going to want to have it written down. You're going to want to test. You're going to want to change, find out what works or what doesn't. And then you're going to test again. And you're going to repeat this process multiple times until you find out what works. It may work for certain areas, it may not work for certain areas. What may work at my kingdom may not work at your kingdom. What may work at my park might not work at your park. It's all about adjusting and adapting, finding out what people would enjoy and what people would have fun with it. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's the goal, is to have fun. So your goal is to create a Battlegame request. Outline it with a description, what type of game it is, your backstory, if there's any special rules, and of course keep it under 3-minute margin if you can, or 1, 2, or 3 special rules that are not too difficult. If it has things that are measured out, like a bridge, try to make a map. Maps are great. They're great resources. And of course other people can of course read that resource as well. And you can put on the paper, bridge is 15 feet by 10 feet. And you're like, okay, cool. And then you can mark it out with your tape, cones, or whatever you need to. Or you can even adjust it depending on what works for your park or not. If you have a bunch of players, you might want to make the bridge wider and longer. If you have less players, then that might be perfect for you. But having a map on your battle game makes it perfect, makes it great and easy for people to see. So your goal is to go ahead and create all of that, make it an objective battle game, and then once you finish everything with that, test it, see what works. If it works, that's fantastic, you did it. Otherwise, double check it, fix some things, adjust some things, and retry it again. Maybe your objectives, there's too less of them or too many of them. Maybe your death counts are too high or they're too low. And those are the kind of things that you'll notice and see and adjust once you get your feedback and other things from other players, because they will give you feedback, because they'll let you know if they had fun or not. And then you just go from there. For questing, it's the same thing. Just go ahead and add a battle game backstory and you can call it a quest. Or you can add different mechanics such as a puzzle or other things, or a bigger backstory to go ahead and have fun with that. And that's really what it is to it. Once you get everything in your mind and you follow simple rules, you plug in things and you make it happen. And that's the main goal, is to make sure that they have fun. Always remember that that's the main goal here. So we're reaching about the 50-minute mark here. I know it's a bit long and a lot of information to go ahead and cover. Of course, if there's any questions, I believe we're doing a Q&A. Or, you can message me, of course, if you have questions. And, of course, I can help you give feedback and all that. But otherwise, that's about it. So thank you for watching. Y'all have a good evening.